All right, hi everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started for our UC Forestry Camp info session today. My name is Sarah Rhodes. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm lucky enough to be the Ecosystem Management and Forestry Advisor, as well as the Conservation and Resource Studies Advisor. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about Forestry Camp today. I have some amazing Forestry Camp alumni with me as well, who are going to share all of their insight into the real forestry camp experience. So I'm going to go ahead and ask our panelists to introduce themselves, share their name, pronouns, and let's say your favorite tree. And we'll start with Diego.
Hey everybody, my name is Diego Riojas. I use the he series of pronouns, and I'm a third year studying forestry, and I went to camp last summer, and my favorite tree is a magnolia tree.
All right, hey everyone, I'm Senya. I'm a second year studying forestry and genetics and plant biology. I also went to camp last year. I use any pronouns, and my favorite tree I would have to say is incense cedar.
Hi all, my name is Liam Geary. I am a fourth year at UC Berkeley studying ecosystems management and forestry. I went to camp last summer, and my favorite tree is a Douglas fir. Oh, and I use the he series.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. So we'll go ahead and get started. And the biggest question, well, what is Forestry Camp? Forestry Camp is a 8-week immersion field experience, and camp provides students with an introduction into the scientific and professional dimensions of forest and wildland resource management. But I'd love to hear from our panelists. How would you guys describe Forestry Camp?
I guess I'll go first. I think it's got a lot of definitions. Like you could put a big umbrella over what forestry camp is to each individual. I mean, literally, it's a classes program where you learn a lot of hands-on important skills related to forestry, but it also is amazing for professional development, and it helped me build a community of people around the school that I knew were like-minded, that I was able to get super close to in just 2 months with living with them. And still get to see them in classes and have that collaboration even after camp. So it's a whole lot of things, but those were some of my biggest takeaways.
I completely agree, Diego. You think like when I came into it, I was thinking it's just going to be regular school, except you're out in the forest, but it's not. It's so much more than that. There's so many like opportunities to do fun stuff even throughout the day. It's such a beautiful environment. And yeah, like Diego said, it's a lot of professional development, a lot of academic development, but a lot of time for fun and for being social, and like Diego said, for building community.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of them. Like there are classes and you are doing school, but it's just such a different environment that sometimes it almost doesn't feel like that at all. It just feels like you're out in the woods with like 35 of your best friends having a really great time. And yeah, like even like along with all the hard skills and like professional development and other things I got out of the program, I think the community was one of the best parts of it.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. Yeah, Forestry Camp is a really wonderful experience. I've been lucky enough to visit several summers, and it's just a beautiful location too. As we can see from this picture, yeah, you're just like out there in the forest, immersed in it with some hard hats, learning all about the trees and the ecology. There are wonderful opportunities to go on hikes. So this is the famous like Spanish Peak hike that all forestry camp students and alumni have participated in over the 100 years that forestry camp has existed. And there's lots of really great hikes all around forestry camp as well. Here's some other pictures of different portions of camp. eating, having meals together, doing freshwater ecology, maybe collecting specimens or plots of land that's happening over there. And then you're also really immersed like in the town of Quincy and the area as well. So this is a picture from the Meadow Valley Fire Department, where our forestry camp got to interact with the community as a whole. So those are just a few of the like hundreds of pictures that I've seen from forestry camp, but I think the pictures capture really like all of the different aspects of camp. So this year's camp is going to be running June 3rd through July 26th. So mark your calendars. It's a pretty quick turnaround from the end of the semester, but the weather is a lot nice and beautiful up there in the mountains at this time. So I think a big question that a lot of students have about forestry camp is, are there any prerequisites for forestry camp? And I think at the most basic level, the forestry camp recommendations, just recommendations, not like hard and fast prerequisites, are like a basic understanding of ecology and some plant biology with a little bit of like introduction to statistics under your belt. Forestry camp alumni, can you comment on any of these?
Definitely. I think that sums it up very well. You get a lot of more in-depth knowledge about the area of like the High Sierras, but going into it with a basic understanding of some plant physiology and like just intro ecology as a base really helps. And then especially the intro statistics. On the academic side, I felt like there was a decent or like an important amount of it was done through R and through coding. And it's nothing crazy that you couldn't learn while at camp, but it definitely helps to have some base in like programming statistics and graphics and that sort of stuff for sure.
Yeah, going off that, I also want to say, if you haven't taken maybe like Stat 20 or one of those other classes, like I think 130 or 173 that use R, don't be too worried about it. I came in, I'd taken Stat 2, which is almost like high school level stats. I hadn't taken anything with like hard programming before, and a lot of it just be ready to pick some stuff up on the fly. They send out a little like preparation packet that has a little bit of information, so read through that. And then statistics wise, it's nothing crazy. It's nothing you probably haven't seen before in like any science classes. So yeah, definitely a good thing to have as a background, but if it's maybe been a while since you've taken stats or you don't think you're like totally up to par in it, like don't be too worried about it. Also, everything that uses coding is a group project in some form, or you can at least like get help from other camp attendees and your TAs. Like everyone's very helpful about stuff like that. So I wouldn't be too worried about having to flounder through it on your by yourself.
And in regards to ecology and plant biology, I felt that like whatever you knew, you would get more out of the more that you knew. Like you'd be like, oh, I've seen that before, I've read that before, I know that. But I also feel if I had walked in with only like even like Sonia said, a high school understanding of those concepts, I feel like I still would have gotten a tremendous amount out of the summer.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for expanding on that. And I'll also say, like, over the years, as like being an administrative person who handles camp, I've seen history students go to camp and anthropology students and art students. So like, you know, even if you aren't as familiar with like ecology and plant biology or statistics, you can go to forestry camp and you can do well and you can succeed. And as our alumni pointed out, there are really wonderful TAs who are really there to help support, as well as your fellow camp members in the academics. Great. So kind of building on the academic side of forestry camp. Forestry camp consists of 11 units over 8 weeks. So it's like definitely fast paced. I like to say that forestry camp is kind of like work hard, play hard. You gain a lot of knowledge all at once. And it's broken up into different sections. And so it's SBUM 105A through SBUM 105D. And I'm going to ask our panelists to go through each class and just kind of like briefly describe what they learned in it. So for SBUM 105, Sierra Nevada Ecology, do one of you guys want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that one. So this is the longest class. It's 3 weeks. It's also the first class you have at camp. And I would say it's the most kind of like grab bag of topics. A lot of the class is taught by different guest lecturers and different professors from Berkeley who will come up for like a day or a couple of days and go over a topic. So you really get to learn from a lot of people who are like the best in their field at the specific topic and are very familiar with that area, which is really nice. I think I'm not totally sure if it's all the same teaching crew next year or like this coming summer, but for us, it was taught by Scott Stevens, who is a really incredible person to learn from and very passionate about his field. But content-wise, it covers basically all general areas of ecology. So we learn like forest ecology, but then we also learn about like plant-insect interactions and then like different fungi of the forest and pathogens and diseases. And then like there's freshwater ecology. There's a whole lot of really cool, you learn like meadow ecology. So a lot of like it's a really great way to get a taste of a bunch of different things in ecology and then kind of figure out what of that you really like and want to learn more of later. And then this is also the class where you learn plant ID. So you learn, I think it was 100, 150, somewhere in that range, different Sierra Nevada plants. Don't worry, it sounds like a lot. It's pretty manageable when you're doing it. But you learn a bunch of different plants and how to identify them and then get quizzed on that in the field. And yeah, there's a lot of different field experiences in that class that are a lot of fun, just trying out different things. I'd say it's the most, I guess, like diverse of the classes in terms of you're covering a really broad area of content.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sonia. And so the next section of forestry camp is SBUM 105B, forest measurements. Diego or Liam, do one of you guys want to take that?
Sure. So SB 105B is a bit different than 105A. It's the shortest class, so it's just 1 week for the entire class. And it's dedicated to really learning how to properly and accurately collect data in the forest that you can use for the projects or that you would use in a job setting. In some ways, it sort of feels like a rapid boot camp of how to do these sorts of data collections, whether it be properly measuring trees at the right height or how to calculate the height of trees, measuring fuel loads, all of these sorts of more in the weeds of forestry as a field ways of measuring. I found this class to be super helpful. It definitely, if you have like organizational issues with data in classes before, this will get all of that right out of you. You have to be on top of your stuff, but it's fun. It's pretty fast paced. And I personally have used the skills that I got from this class in a job that I've recently been working for the past year with the Berkeley Fire Safe Council. So like the things they're learning, even if this is geared more towards people looking into forestry, in this 1 week class, you'll prepare yourself for an entry-level forestry position in terms of knowing how to use specific tools, how to organize like your data collection. And it's fun. It's got like a sort of, or at least when our year had a group project that was sort of easy to do, you know, it gets you ready for what happens later with that last class, which is a big group project. Sorry to spoil whoever is going to talk about that, but very helpful, fast paced, but you learn a lot.
Thanks, Diego. And so those keeping track, right? We're already halfway through camp. We just went through weeks 1 through 4 with 105A and 105B. So then SBUM 105C is civiculture and utilization. Liam, you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was the class for us where the veil is kind of starting to be pulled back, and you've gotten a lot of like introductory information. You feel like you kind of know what's going on, and then you get to see the whole wide world where the things that you've been learning are applied. And for our class, and I nod if you agree, it was mostly a field trip based class. It was much less hands-on than the previous classes. But that was kind of nice because we got to see a wide range of organizations and operations. We get to see a couple of different mills from a scale of a couple people to one of the largest mills in the state. And we got to see nonprofits. We got to see the Forest Service and have a day with CAL FIRE. And what I understood it to be, what I experienced it to be, was really just like a crash course in like who does forestry in the state of California, and what do they do when they do it. So we got to meet a lot of really cool people, and we got to learn a lot of really cool things. We got to see kind of the nuts and bolts of names that you hear all the time, but you may not know exactly what they do.
Thanks so much, Liam. And then the end of camp finishes us off with SBUM 105D, Forest Management and Assessment. Does someone want to talk about that experience?
Yeah, so like Diego spoiled earlier, 105D is basically the culmination of everything you've learned in the previous 6 weeks. It's kind of definitely I'd say the most hands-on of the classes, or hands-on in terms of you're doing a lot of stuff, hands-off in terms of the professors are there to help you and guide you through stuff, but like ultimately this is kind of where you're on your own. You're in a group of, I think all of our groups were 3 or 4 people, and you get assigned a stand area of somewhere around 100 acres, a little more, a little less, basically to write up a management plan for. So you go through all the steps of writing a management plan for like various objectives. We got assigned 2 different ones. Like I think my group did an objective where you were managing this to like maximize timber output, and then one where you were managing it for like fuels reduction. Some people did like carbon storage. So kind of all over the place there, but you have basically like the 2 weeks to like do all your plot assessments. You like design the way you're going to lay out plots across the landscape, and then you go do them. You take all your data, you process all your data, you write up your report, and then you present it to a panel of both your professors and then also a bunch of like local foresters from different agencies in the area. Like I think our group presented to like a forester from the Forest Service. There was, I think, maybe someone from CAL FIRE, and then a couple different private nonprofit foresters. So it's a really good way to show all that you've learned and get a chance to apply it and like really have it stick, because you're doing this mostly by yourself. But also just a really great way to get feedback on everything you've learned from like people who are really experienced in these fields, people who write these plans every day and actually have them applied. And it was just, yeah, a really great way to get a sense of what foresters are actually out there doing every day. Like you've seen like a day in their lives from like going on field trips, especially in 105C, but then in 105D, you really get to like be the forester and go through all that work. And I thought it was a really cool experience. It's definitely like a little more crunch time. There's a little more independent work. You're like working a little longer days, but nothing totally insane. And by this point, you're like so familiar with everyone at camp. It's like, it's kind of fun, like everyone being stressed about it together. But yeah, a really fun class. You really get to know your group pretty well. And yeah, a great way to end camp with your presentation.
For sure. And just to sort of add on to that, it is like full immersion and also like a very full sense of accomplishment at the end. It definitely acts as a capstone to the other 3 classes. I would say you're taking every bits and pieces that you have gotten over the past 6 weeks, and also with your group, what they have taken away and their personal mindsets and ways of thinking about it to tackle a very open-ended question that you sort of get to define for yourself, and really make your own. Like no 2 of these plans are the same. Each of these stands of like 100 or so acres, very different, and it really shows you the ins and outs, and how much you have to think about in a very good way that, you know, it ends off camp well, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with both my fellow alumni. And I'd like to add that it is a lot of time, like Sonia mentioned. But there's never any one point where you're like, oh, this is incredibly difficult. Like I can't do this anymore. It's and that goes for the whole camp too. Like there is a lot that you have to get done in 8 weeks, but the program is scaled really well. I think you guys would agree. So that by the time you get to kind of the next level of whatever you're doing, you're ready for it. And And yeah, even if it takes more time, it's not like you're like, oh, like this is terrible. I mean, a lot of the time it doesn't even feel like homework, right? Would you guys agree with that? Yeah. And it's not like math homework.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing your perspective. We've kind of touched on this a little bit, mentioned them a couple of times, but can any of you guys speak to like what the interactions are like with the instructors, or can you talk about your experience with the TAs?
For sure, it is a great way to like always have a professor's ear. I don't know, the classes I was taking before I went to forestry camp were more on the like very big lecture hall, many more GSIs than professor. But at forestry camp, you know, it's you and 30, 40 or so people, and you're living with the professor too. They live at camp with you. So at meal times, you can pick their ear about the class content, but also you learn a lot about how these like big names in forestry, like I know Sonia mentioned Scott Stevens, which definitely is a big name, but how they got to where they are, their sort of mindset towards the field and their love for it too. So it's a really great way to develop personal connections with your professors and get that extra bit of knowledge that's sort of hard to while you're in a classroom here on campus, especially a bigger one.
Yeah, I definitely second everything Diego was saying about professors. It's a really great chance to, and like I was kind of in the same boat. Like I came out of this, most of my classes before had been like, you know, like the bigger lower divisions. It's like, okay, Bio 1B, great class. You get to talk to the professor like maybe once. It's a huge class. I think there was like 1,000 people in my lecture. So it was like almost like a culture shock going into this, where it's like, wow, if I have a question for this professor, he's so easy to find. I eat breakfast with him. So it was really great in that sense, getting the chance to like build deeper connections. Like I feel a lot more familiar with a lot of the like Berkeley forestry and like the SBIM department now. But then also like with the TAs are super great because they're there the whole 8 weeks. So each of the professors is only there for the length of their class, but the TAs, you really get to know them. They're again also living at camp, like coming on all your field days with you. And they're such a great resource because they're all students who have been through who have been to forestry camp before. So you get that they have that familiarity with like, okay, this is where I struggled a little bit. Like, okay, this is how I learned how to figure this out, or this is how I got through this same coding problem we had last year. Like I remember, I think I was having an issue in R, and I talked to one of our TAs, Sienna, and she was like, I had that exact same issue last year, and she pulled up her code and showed me how she debugged it last year. And it was, or not last year, but when she'd been to camp. And it was just, it's such a cool experience to have these TAs there who have truly like been through everything you're going through and like are fully aware of kind of the best ways to get through it. So yeah, definitely they're a really great resource.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that was said by Diego and Sonia, and I'll add on that it both in the TAs and the professors, and Sonia touched on this a little bit. It really is a great opportunity to help clarify your understandings of like where you want to get to and who you want to be professionally and sometimes personally too, because these are people who are very accomplished in their field in terms of the professors and people who are starting where people who are where you're going to be in 1 or 2 years in terms of the TAs. And yeah, I feel that they're all great role models our year, definitely. And I feel like especially talking with them, like Sonia said, at meals, but even just being around them kind of rubs off. You can see like what you want to do, what you don't want to do, and maybe who you don't want to be.
That's a great perspective. You have to learn what you don't want just as much as you have to learn what you do want. Thank you guys. So we've kind of touched about the academics, but I'd love to give our attendees like an idea of what an average day at forestry camp looks like. Could you guys lay that out for them?
Waking up early, that's first. If you're trying to get into a circadian rhythm that's more healthy than the one you have at college, like I was, it's great for it. Breakfast is same time every day, which was 7 for us. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I no longer could keep up that rhythm. Either way, waking up earlier, having breakfast with the people you live with. It's great. And then typically field work will happen earlier in the day just to take advantage of those like cooler temperatures as it gets up. So the professors, the TAs will lay out the day. Honestly, a lot of the days it was sometimes a surprise what you were going to be doing, which some parts good, some parts less so. But at the end of the day, you know that it's planned out. You'll go out and you'll spend the day in the field, whether that be going and touring like a timber company's lands, or whether it be going and doing some data sampling yourself for a project. It will be almost every day includes a solid amount of outside time. I'm gonna pass it off to one of my fellow alumni to go over another part of the day.
Yeah, sure. So, like my chore at camp was lighting the wood stoves, which heated the hot water in the shower and bathroom. So, like most of the time, my day would start a little bit earlier. And I think 6 was like the benchmark for having the fire lit. So I would get up, light the fire, usually fall back asleep, have dinner, like Diego said, or have breakfast. The food is good. You know, you might hear some people disagree, but the food is good and it's regular and there's a lot of it. Which you can't complain about. And yeah, like Diego said, you'll usually one part of the day is field work, the other part of the day is a lecture. Lunch you make in the morning and you get to eat usually out on the grade with your friends and classmates in a beautiful spot. And then dinner is shortly after the end of class usually. And at night, depending on the day of the week and where you're at in the summer, sometimes you might finish up on some of your homework, sometimes you might go for a hike. Swimming, our year we went swimming, you know, some weeks 5-6 times a week. And it's nice. Sometimes you might get a break in the middle of the day and you can go swimming and get food in town then. And then sometimes you'll be in one spot, you know, a couple hours away from camp all day. So like Diego said, it changes from day to day, but there's a lot of variety.
Yeah, definitely seconding both of them. If you're not a morning person before camp, camp will make you a morning person. I would say I was definitely a night owl before, and now I just kind of stuck to the camp schedule when I came back, which has been great for productivity. But yeah, I definitely would say I woke up probably around like 6:30, breakfast at 7. Yeah, make your lunch in the morning. So if you aren't into sandwiches now, you're going to be really into sandwiches. That's most of what you eat for lunch consistently. Although I guess if they're bad sandwiches, you're the one who made them, so it's your fault. But yeah, definitely. I agree that the food is really good and you're getting offered it consistently. If you are recently coming out of Cal Dining, definitely a big step up from that. But yeah, it was really nice having a very consistent schedule to go along with, like they were saying, even though stuff changes day to day, when you're in the field, when you're in lecture, and especially changes a lot based on the class and the professor. Like I think for 105A, we would always have a lecture like 8 to 9 a.m. and then be in the field, and then maybe like a little lecture from or out in the field. But for the most part, I think we were back every day by like 2:30 or 3. But you still keep that schedule in terms of like the meals are pretty much always at the same time, even if you're in the field. There's always like some free time after dinner if there's not the occasional evening lecture, although I wouldn't say that those were super common. And yeah, you get a lot of free time generally, which isn't something I was really expecting, but there's always like little pockets of a couple hours here and there during the day and in the evening that you can just go do fun things, go be out in the woods around camp, go into town, definitely go swimming. We did a lot of that. But yeah, it's nice in that you have both like the kind of rigorous schedule to stick with in terms of class stuff, but then it's very flexible after that.
Thank you, everybody. And yeah, just to clarify and make sure everybody knows, the camp schedule is Monday through Friday. You're doing lectures, you're out in the field, and then weekends are your own to do with what you'd like, with the exception of, I think it's the first Saturday, which is alumni weekend, which is a really great experience, and I'll let them talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, that's a general day in the life of forestry camp. I'll go ahead and let us pivot to what housing is like at forestry camp. Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I can take this one. Generally, oh, sorry, Jacob. Generally, there's two different styles of housing. Also, just to clarify, you're not camping. There are a couple of, we had like an overnight, I think once, that you were camping. If you don't have stuff, don't worry about it, they'll provide it. And then there was also like people will go on camping trips regularly, like independently. So if you have stuff, bring it. But day to day, you're not camping, you're sleeping in built structures. You have two options of structures. There are the bunkhouses, which are a little more like solid building style. It's like 5 rooms next to each other in a little line, and then there's like 5 of those buildings. And then there's also shanties, which are a little standalone. They're more like cabins. They have like a screened mesh around the roof, so they're a little more open. All of them, regardless of which kind you're staying in, they all have electricity. They all have lighting. It's not like you are living in like an actual room. They were all set up as doubles, I think, our year. I guess it depends on the people going to camp. We only had one set of people with roommates, so pretty much everyone was staying by themselves. And yeah, really nice housing setup. I think we'll get to this later, but housing and food are paid for, so very nice, especially considering that. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think I was worried about it. I haven't been before going to camp, was not a super big like camper in my life before Berkeley. Not something I necessarily had a ton of experience with, so I was a little nervous about it, but I wouldn't say it's something to be stressed about. You'll definitely get used to it. And then like facilities wise, it's pretty great. The only thing I'd say that surprised me in terms of being rustic is like Leah mentioned, the wood stoves for the bathroom. So if you want a hot shower, got to put wood in the stove first, which you get used to pretty quick, and it's a lot of fun. So
I had a shanty style of housing and I loved it. It was like a Disney movie. Like Sonia said, there is like 360-degree, like a screen wire, like chicken wire window. It's high enough off the ground that nobody can see in, but you can see out. You can hear the birds in the morning. You can hear the rain hitting your roof. You can see all the beautiful trees. It's super easy to wake up in a shanty because that sunlight is in there before you are waking up. And I mean, no matter what type of housing, and you walk out your front door and you're in this beautiful natural place. And like Sonia said, like you especially if you go with the shanty, it's enough that you feel like, oh, I'm in the woods. You don't feel like you're in unit 2 or whatever. But it's also enclosed enough that you're not like roughing it. You don't have to worry about like mountain lions at your bedside in the morning.
Yeah, fully agree with both of them. I think a big part of it is that the bathrooms are communal, and showers are communal as well, and it is on you. Like it's part of the chore system that gets sort of developed as a community at camp to upkeep those. And if you're on top of it, it is not terrible. And honestly, it was great to have to light a fire every time I wanted my own hot shower. It taught me how to light a fire consistently. And all of these sorts of things at camp, it was great having any problem that I was like facing very immediate to me, whether it be, all right, I have a cold shower. Do I take a cold shower or a hot shower? Well, I can go start a fire. Is it too cold in do I have a bad mattress in my room? Let's see if somebody around camp has an extra that, because they aren't doubling. There's all of it is very manageable within the like somewhat little bubble of camp, and it's a great way to live. And it really sort of takes you away from the life you may have been living here at Berkeley. And I found that to be very, very valuable.
Awesome, thank you all. So how much does forestry camp cost? So forestry camp takes place during summer sessions, and so all of the tuition and fees are decided by summer sessions. So the UC student rate for summer session classes this summer is $419 per unit, and forestry camp is 11 units. And then there's a $419 campus fee. So the total cost of camp is $5,028. As I think it was Sonia mentioned, food and housing costs are paid for. So all of the housing and food is covered. So you're just paying for the tuition. And a lot of our students may be eligible for summer financial aid. So I encourage everybody who is interested in forestry camp to go talk to Cal Student Central and see what your summer financial aid package can look like. I will also say for maybe some other people watching, grad students and non-UC students pay a different rate, which can be found on the summer sessions website. Okay, great. So I want to go ahead and open us up for some questions. There is a Q&A feature that you guys can utilize, or put it in the chat, or raise your hand. We want to hear your questions and clarify any thing you want to learn more about forestry camp, or any concerns that you have. Colin, go for it.
Hi everyone, I'm Colin Vale, he, him. Hopefully going next or this coming summer. But I was wondering how, like, is there kind of cellular data in the area, or do any of the buildings have Wi-Fi, or like what is the means of communication with the outside world? I guess would be my question.
That's a great question. There is one main building that's like a 3 or 4 minute walk from the center of main camp. Can be at a give or take a couple minutes depending on where your particular bunk is. But that building has like real Wi-Fi that you can use, and it also has computers and monitors set up there. It's your best shot like for guaranteed Wi-Fi. I have Verizon. I had zero service except for like one bar every once in a while that I could send like the SMS text messages on. However, it depends a lot on your carrier. There are ways though that you can look up online if your carrier is like available in specific areas. So do that. But honestly, I found myself not relying on or wanting to fill my time with stuff that requires Wi-Fi. Of course, it was great to be able to reach out to people when I needed to, it only being like a 5-minute or walk away, a little stroll up the hill. But you for the most part won't find that need that necessary.
Yeah, and also to add to that, it is the Wi-Fi at that building is very limited. It's pretty remote. So if like 3 people are trying to make a phone call at the same time, it'll start cutting out. So you kind of got to time your. My main thing was, I was like every so often, like I wanted to call my family and see how they're doing, and definitely could call. Video calls kind of hit or miss. If you pick your times, work super well. If you're the only one on the Wi-Fi, it's great. But especially around like final project time, when everyone is trying to use the internet, it's like it can handle maybe like 5 or 6 computers and it starts dropping off. I'll also say another carrier, T-Mobile, no service anywhere in the area for like until you get into town. So like a good like 15, 20 minutes out. But if there's something like if you really need to make like an important call, or like I had an interview, or like a lot of people had enrollment times, you can get into, there's good service for I think all major carriers, and then good Wi-Fi at the Quincy Public Library. So if it's something important enough to make the drive out, especially if you have a car or one of your friends does, which will probably happen, definitely there's that option if it's something that you're pretty desperate for. But in terms of like day-to-day stuff, I ended up really liking not having access to data. Like I just downloaded a bunch of music, and then if I needed to be on my phone, that's pretty much all I was doing. But it was really nice as someone who I would say I'm pretty reliant on technology, and it was really great to have a break from it and not like be constantly glued to my phone just because there wasn't really anything to look at on there. So I mostly just ended up using mine as like a camera the whole time, and that was honestly the best option for me.
I rock a flip phone. I have Straight Talk Wireless, and I had perfect service everywhere in camp. I was the only person who could call and text anywhere. But more importantly, like my fellow classmates, I didn't really feel the need. I think the best answer to is there Wi-Fi is there is just enough for your needs.
Awesome, thank you all. So we have a question. Is it possible to take only part of forestry camp? For example, if I only wanted to take 105A, I can go ahead and answer this. The answer is no. Forestry camp is an immersive 8-week experience, and it's also a really like not, I don't want to say competitive, but like there are a lot of people who want to go to forestry camp and want to take the full 8 weeks. So if you're going to camp, you're taking those full 8 weeks, 105A through 105D. And then I'll pop us off to the next question, which is, are there a lot of opportunities / places to go camping outside of class?
As many as one can find. Camp is in the middle of a national forest, so if dispersed camping is your thing, you can go camping to your heart's content. But it is also a decently short drive from like Lassen National Park, in so many different beautiful areas around, like the town of Quincy, Feather River, Lake Almanor, which is in a little bit of a rough spot with the recent wildfires in the past few years, but it's still so many beautiful spots to go camping. And also, if like day trips are more your thing, you can do a different thing every single day of the weekends that you get, and still feel like you wish you could have gone to a couple more lakes or a couple more creek spots. The opportunities are really endless for recreation outside of class, I would say.
Awesome. Another question from our attendees. If I'm graduating spring 2025, could I take forestry camp the following summer? And the answer is yes. So we would extend your graduation date to summer 2025, but don't worry, you can still walk in commencement with all your friends, and then end your time at Berkeley at forestry camp, which is a pretty great way to end it. So yes, graduating seniors can go to forestry camp, and we can extend your graduation date to summer 2025, no problem. I'll go ahead and ask another question. Can we do both Maria and forestry camp? I can say, I think this last year you guys had a camp attendee who went to forestry camp and then literally finished up camp and then went to Maria that fall. So yes, you can do both forestry camp and Maria or another study abroad experience. Just recognizing that forestry camp takes place during the summer and we can't be in 2 places at once. Okay, another question. How many people are typically accepted each year? That's a great question. So about 40 people are accepted to forestry camp each year. Students in the ecosystem management and forestry major get guaranteed enrollment. So they take up about 25 seats. And then the remaining 15 seats are dispersed among the different applicants. I'll go ahead and take another one. Do you get your forestry minor after camp? Yes, you can get your forestry minor after camp, and that's about how I would say 99% of people get the forestry minor is by going to camp. 105A through D counts for the minor, and then there's one other class that you have to take, but chances are especially if you're a CNR student, you've already taken the other class because it's things like 50 AC. And you can just look up the forestry minor snapshot and make sure that you've taken that other class. But yeah, you can definitely get the forestry minor after camp, and that's something that I send out to all of my camp attendees. I'll open this question up to Kenley.
Hi, I just have a couple questions about camp life specifically. One is, I know visitors are allowed, but I was wondering what the regulation is for that in terms of numbers of visits / who can visit / when can they visit and stuff like that.
Yeah, generally day visitors, totally fine, especially on weekends. I think there's a rate for having people stay over. Correct me if I'm wrong, if either of you know, there's a rate for people staying over, and then if they're staying during meal times, they have to pay a rate. But if you have I had like a couple friends up who like camped outside of camp and then just like drove up and came to visit, and that was super great. I'd say I don't think there's a limitation on how frequent you can have visitors or anything. I'd just say weekends probably your best bet anyways. Just because on weekdays you're kind of like, especially during the day, you're so busy, there's not really a lot of time to like have visitors over, and it's nice to spend time with other people at camp as well. But yeah, I would definitely say there are visitors over on the weekends all the time. I think I would say a lot of people had people visit like maybe once or twice in the summer on average. But yeah, definitely something doable. As long as they're willing to drive out there, which was a hard sell on some of my friends, but
Sweet, thank you so much. That's great to know. My other question was in terms of just like sick policy. I'm sure people get sick sometimes during those long weeks, like missing class, late to class, like just in general, how is this structured? Because I assume it's pretty understandable. Everyone knows what's going on with everyone else, but also just like in general, are we supposed to do any like quarantining if someone does get sick, especially if you're sharing a bunk with someone? Like what could someone like expect if they were to come and then have that happen?
So as for like sort of course logistics, at least with my understanding, my experience, there was like ultimate understanding. The TAs are really great networks for that, and the professors also were very understanding. But as for like the actual sickness protocols, I'm less informed.
yeah, I think there is a fairly standard, I think, COVID quarantining protocol. And then for other illnesses as well. Definitely quarantine yourself if you can. Professors were very understanding about like, especially about like being worried about being contagious. There's also kind of the understanding that, and I say this as someone who is like immunocompromised and had to worry about that during the summer. You're in very close quarters with like 35 other people at least the whole time. So definitely like just you're outdoors most of the time. So that definitely like helped my anxiety about it a bit. But if that's something you are worried about and like poses especially health risk for you, I would just keep that in mind. Just not trying to discourage anyone from going to camp or anything like that. And I found a super great experience, and I did end up getting sick. It wasn't COVID, not something contagious or anything like that, but I found professors to be super understanding of a lot of my like health challenges. And then there were a couple times where like I had to miss class for being sick, and professors were generally very good about that. And seconding what Diego said about the TAs, they're very helpful in terms of anything from like helping me like get out to the pharmacy for like a run into town because I didn't have a car. So they would like offer to drive me out or like pick up anything I needed when I was sick and like get coursework like to and from my bunkhouse, which was super helpful and great. And definitely, yeah, people are very understanding about it. And there is a quarantine policy for COVID. And it's definitely something that health-wise I thought was pretty manageable, even with some of the illnesses I have outside of class.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I was just curious because I know it's such like an intense 8 weeks. I was wondering what happened if you missed some, but I appreciate the information, Diego and Sonia.
So another question we have is, if I'm graduating this spring and I don't get into camp this summer, can I reapply next summer? And so the answer to that is yes, you can. However, you would be applying and would have to pay tuition as a non-UC student. So that's just something to be mindful of. You know, we have people who have attended camp who aren't UC Berkeley students necessarily. We've had community college students go or UC Davis students go. But, you know, recognizing that your tuition rate would be different because you would no longer be a UC Berkeley student. Okay, and I'm going to, you know, just be mindful of our time right now. So I'll go ahead and let us end with this question. I was wondering what the admissions timeline is like. So right now, yay, Forestry Camp application is open through March 13th. So we have about 3 weeks for you guys to submit your applications to the website. Then I send all of our applications to the Forestry Camp instructor panel, and they make all of the decisions on who will be attending camp. And they get back to me usually by like late March, I would say. And then I send out the email communications to all of our applicants. There's like a first round of people who get into camp, and like I said, EMF majors get guaranteed enrollment. So the best way to get to forestry camp is to be an EMF major, just plug in that major there. But also we have like the group of people who aren't EMF majors, and they get their announcement emails, and then there's a ranked waiting list. And so the ranked waiting list, I will reach out to each of those people, letting them know like where they are on the waiting list. And as people drop off from camp, or as spots open up, I then reach out down through the waiting list. And so sometimes I can get pretty far on the waiting list because people make plans. And like I had reached out to a student 2 or 3 days before camp started, and they accepted and went to camp. So it can be a quick turnaround if you're on that waiting list. And then we also typically have like a forestry camp meeting during RRR week with the instructors so that you guys can get a really good understanding of what to expect further at camp. Great, and that is exactly 4 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and thank all of my wonderful forestry camp alumni, Diego, Sonia, and Liam. If you have any additional questions, you can go ahead and email me there at that email address there. And I hope to see all of your applications in our pool this year. Everybody have a great day. Thanks.